Hello friends, welcome to my new learning video. Today we are going to learn constructors and its chaining. ठीक है. सो आज अगर आप वीडियो पूरा देख लेते हो ओवर कंस्ट्रक्टर्स एंड इट्स चेनिंग, तो मैं दावा के साथ बोल सकता हूँ कि आपको कोई डाउट नहीं रहेगा रिगार्डिंग कंस्ट्रक्टर्स, एंड इंटरव्यू में जो भी क्वेश्चंस पूछे जाएंगे आप उसका धड़ल्ले से जवाब दे सकोगे. ठीक है. सो वीडियो के एंड तक बने रहिए एंड लेट्स लर्न द कंस्ट्रक्टर्स एंड इट्स चेनिंग. ओके. What is constructor? Okay, so constructor is nothing but a special method that is used to initialize the objects. ठीक है. जनरली इसका कोई एग्जैक्ट डिफिनीशन नहीं है, बट हाँ आप ऐसा बोल सकते हो कि इट्स नथिंग बट ए स्पेशल मेथड. कंस्ट्रक्टर भी एक मेथड के जैसा ही होता है दैट इज यूज टू इनिशियलाइज द ऑब्जेक्ट्स. ठीक है. कंस्ट्रक्टर कैसे हम लोग डिफाइन करते हैं, जब भी जैसे मैंने एग्जांपल में आपको दिया हुआ है, आप यहाँ पे एग्जांपल से समझ सकते हो. जैसे अगर आप कोई क्लास बनाते हो तो कंस्ट्रक्टर क्या होगा, एग्जैक्ट द नेम ऑफ द क्लास नेम. ओके, जरा सा भी इधर उधर कुछ नहीं. सो आप देख पा रहे हो कि एग्जैक्ट सिमिलर मेथड सिग्नेचर है. जैसे आप कोई भी मेथड डिक्लेयर करते हो तो वैसे ही आप कंस्ट्रक्टर भी डिफाइन कर सकते हो. ठीक है. ए हो गया रिटर्न एक्सेस मॉडिफायर्स पब्लिक, एंड देयर इज नो रिटर्न टाइप इन द कंस्ट्रक्टर. ओके, कंस्ट्रक्टर का कोई रिटर्न टाइप नहीं होता है, क्योंकि कंस्ट्रक्टर का काम क्या है, टू जस्ट इनिशियलाइज द ऑब्जेक्ट्स. जो भी ऑब्जेक्ट्स में जो भी प्रॉपर्टीज है, जो भी फील्ड्स हैं, उनकी इनिशियलाइजेशन के लिए हम लोग कंस्ट्रक्टर का यूज करते हैं. सो व्हाइल क्रिएटिंग ऑब्जेक्ट, सो उस समय हम लोग पैरामीटर पास कर सकते हैं. सो देयर आर टाइप्स ऑफ कंस्ट्रक्टर, विल कवर लेटर, बट द यूज ऑफ कंस्ट्रक्टर इज टू इनिशियलाइज द ऑब्जेक्ट्स ओनली, नॉट टू क्रिएट द ऑब्जेक्ट्स. जस्ट बी क्लियर ऑन दिस. ओके, द यूज ऑफ कंस्ट्रक्टर इज नॉट टू क्रिएट द ऑब्जेक्ट. ओके, द यूज ऑफ कंस्ट्रक्टर इज टू इनिशियलाइज द ऑब्जेक्ट्स. ठीक है. और कंस्ट्रक्टर आप कैसे डिफाइन करोगे, फर्स्ट यू नीड टू गिव एक्सेस मॉडिफायर्स, देन द क्लास नेम. द कंस्ट्रक्टर नेम विल बी द सेम एज ऑफ द क्लास नेम. ठीक है. एंड इनसाइड दिस यू कैन इनिशियलाइज द प्रॉपर्टी ऑफ द ऑब्जेक्ट. ठीक है. सो हियर आई हैव मेंशन्ड रिटन ऑल द पॉइंट्स, लाइक इट्स नथिंग बट a special method that is used to initialize the objects. Constructor method is defined with same name as of the class name. ठीक है. अगर आप कुछ भी चेंज करोगे then that Java will understand it like a simple normal method. Okay, not constructor. So अगर आप normal method define करोगे then you have to give the return type also in between the public and student. Okay, there is no return type in constructor, only access modifier and name of constructor as class name. ठीक है. use of constructor is to initialize the objects, not to create the object. ठीक है. so type of constructor, default constructor, no argument constructor, non parameterized constructor और parameterized constructor. ठीक है. सो डिफ़ॉल्ट कंस्ट्रक्टर किसको बोलेंगे, देखिए डिफ़ॉल्ट तो तभी होता है जब आप कुछ नहीं कर रहे हो. ठीक है. जैसे इस एग्जांपल की मैं बात करूं तो यहाँ पे मैंने क्या किया है कि एक्सप्लिसिटली आई हैव डिफाइंड वन कंस्ट्रक्टर विथ ऑफ नो आर्ग्यूमेंट. देखिए क्या है कि इस स्टूडेंट में जब मैं यहाँ पे कोई भी आर्ग्यूमेंट पास नहीं कर रहा हूँ देन दिस इज नो आर्ग्यूमेंट, राइट, नॉट अ पैरामीटराइज्ड. दिस इज नॉट अ पैरामीटराइज्ड और नो आर्ग्यूमेंट कंस्ट्रक्टर. ठीक है. बट दिस इज नॉट ए डिफ़ॉल्ट कंस्ट्रक्टर. ठीक है. डिफ़ॉल्ट कंस्ट्रक्टर क्या होता है कि जब आप कोई भी कंस्ट्रक्टर डिफाइन नहीं कर रहे हो देन जावा बाय डिफ़ॉल्ट पुट अ नो आर्ग्यूमेंट कंस्ट्रक्टर. ठीक है. आप उसमें नहीं करते हो, जावा इम्प्लिसिटली उसमें पुट कर देता है अगर आप डिफाइन नहीं करोगे तो. अगर आपको लगता है कि आप कंस्ट्रक्टर आपने डिफाइन नहीं किया है एंड देयर इज नो कंस्ट्रक्टर देन यू आर रॉन्ग. JVM will default place a by default constructor that is also equivalent to no argument constructor. ठीक है. सो डोंट गेट कंफ्यूज बिटवीन डिफॉल्ट कंस्ट्रक्टर एंड नो आर्ग कंस्ट्रक्टर. ठीक है. एंड पैरामीटराइज्ड कंस्ट्रक्टर, विल सी इन द एग्जांपल व्हाट आई मीन नॉन आर्गुमेंट और पैरामीटराइज्ड. ओके, पैरामीटराइज्ड मीन्स व्हाट, सी लेट्स से इफ आई हैव डिफाइंड सम प्रॉपर्टी like let's say student ID, student name, roll number, right, all these fields all these are the information of an student, so these are the property. Okay, so if I am defining that and if I pass those fields as an argument then that is called a parameterized constructor. ठीक है. so इसको मैं एग्जांपल से आपको अच्छी तरीके से एक्सप्लेन करूंगा, देन you will not have any type of you will not get confused like that what is default constructor, what is no argument constructor, what is parameterized constructor. See example of constructor here I have defined. Okay, so this was I am saying like private int student ID. Okay, private string student name. So See, student ID and student name is the information of an student. So this is the basically property of an student. Okay, student ID and student name. See, here I have defined no arg constructor. Likewise, public class name. Okay, and there is no argument passed inside this bracket. So there is no argument. Okay, that's why it's called no argument constructor. Default constructor is like the same, but in case if you are not defining any constructor, then only default constructor will come in the picture. Let's say if you define any constructor, like here I have defined no argument constructor, single parameter constructor. Single parameter means, see, there is two parameter given. So according to your need, you can give any a number of arguments in constructor. So I have covered all the parameters, like single parameter with student ID, single parameter with student name, and both parameter student ID and student name. Okay, let's say if there are 10 fields in this constructor in this class, then you can create a constructor with 10 fields also. ठीक है, बट क्या होता है ना कि दैट इज नॉट ए गुड प्रैक्टिस, क्योंकि अगर कल को गए आपने एक प्रॉपर्टी और ऐड किया, then you will have to add that property in the constructor also in this argument, right? So the standard practice is not to create the parameterized constructor, okay, until unless you are sure that this is not going to change. ठीक है, so according to your requirement you can create the no argument constructor, you can create the parameterized constructor. Okay, so it's all up to you. So this is the example of constructor. Let me show you in the Eclipse, like how I have written the program there. Let me show you. Okay, so here you can see that I have created class student. This is a class student, and I have created two field, student ID and student name. This is the default no argument constructor. Since there is no argument, so this is no arg constructor. ठीक है, okay, caps lock is on. Let me do correctly. No arg constructor. ठीक है, here I have not passed any argument. Here you can see that I have passed one argument of the student ID. So this is single argument constructor, or in general parameterized constructor. ठीक है, single parameter constructor. Okay, here you can see that I have passed one parameter called student ID, and inside this I am initializing the student ID by assigning the value of that you have passed in the parameter. This can be changed. Okay, don't get confused, since I have given the same parameter like of the variable, but you can give anything else. Like let's say I am giving just ID only. Okay, just to make you clear, student ID, then I have to pass here ID also, and that's fine. Overall point is that if I am passing any argument, that argument will assign the value into this student ID. ठीक है, now again I have created one constructor with single parameter, that is of the student name. So here I am assigning the student name. Okay, here I have covered all the parameters. Okay, for this case there is double, two parameters are there, so that's why double parameter constructor. Okay, just to covered all the constructor that we can define for this class, that I have covered. Let's say if I am removing all these things, there is no constructor in this class now. Okay, since there is no constructor, then that doesn't mean there is no constructor. JVM will put a default constructor, and that default constructor will be the same as of the no-arg constructor. Okay, so from the main method still let me do Control Z, let me comment it, it's better, so that I can uncomment after and do some changes. Okay, so here you can see that I have commented all the constructors. So right now there is no constructor available in this program, but still I can create the object of student class, student equal to new student. ठीक है, so here I am able to create the object of student. Okay, so with new keyword we can create the object. ठीक है, so how we can create object? So just remember, we'll cover later also, because there are multiple ways to create object. Okay, we'll cover later, but for now you can understand that with new keyword we can create object. So class name, this is the type. Okay, don't get confused that this is the use, with this type you are creating object. No, to create object, this line is sufficient. New student, only this. Okay, the selected highlighted one, you can see that new student is sufficient to create the object. Only we have stored what type of object is it, is type of object is student, so that's why I have given over a student. Okay, so if there is case of inheritance, let's say I am extending, extends employee. Okay, because you can see that in the next tab there is a class called employee. Okay, so I can give here employee also. Okay, so what is object? Object is of a student type, student. Okay, but type of object is employee. Okay, so this is a basic difference between the type. So right now I am not using this, inheritance over here. See, now there is error that change the type, change the type of student to student. Okay, so I have to give the type student. So I hope I am able to make you clear that how you can create object and what is the meaning of this line. Okay, see, I have this is a new student. Okay, so this student is basically, used to call the constructor. Okay, and you can see that I have not passed any value. Okay, that means this will call No-Arg constructor, and there you can see that there is No-Arg constructor is not available. I have commented, but still I am able to create. Why and how? Because JVM have put, we cannot see that default constructor that you can see in the class file, but here you cannot see that one. Okay, so JVM will put a default constructor, and that is the No-Arg constructor. That's why I am saying. Okay, let me enable the line. Okay, so I am explaining you, all the scenario. See, I have defined the constructor. Okay, I have commented the only default constructor, sorry, means No-Arg constructor. Okay, but I have defined other parameterized constructor. You can see that it's on, right? There is no comment, but for the No-Arg constructor still comment is there, and I am creating the object of using the No-Arg constructor. Okay, and you can see that there is an error. How? Because add argument to match, it's saying there is no, the constructor student is undefined, means I have not defined the No-Arg constructor. That's why I am getting this error. Okay, so what does it mean? If I am defining any constructor, then JVM will not put or place a default constructor. Okay, so let's enable this one. So this is the, now the error is gone. Okay, now this is the No-Arg constructor called. So when I am calling this one, so this is going call this No-Arg constructor and initializing the value of student ID, and let me print out the student ID. It's the object one, right? Student dot get student ID I am doing. Okay, now let me run this program. You can see below the main method that I have created the getter and setter method also. That's why I am able to use get student ID. Error exists. Where is error? Okay, not in this class, maybe in some other class there will be an error. Okay, student ID equal to 1. Okay, so what does it mean? That I have created object with the default with the No-Arg constructor, have not passed anything, but in this constructor I have initialized as hard code. Okay, student ID is 1 and name is ABC. But let's create a constructor with argument. So I have called student, okay, with the new student 10. Now what is the ID of a student? So this is calling the constructor of int parameter. Okay, see, this is the case of method overloading. Okay, student, and there is same method but have the no argument, single argument, but type is different, single argument, type is different, two arguments, right? So this is a case of method overloading. So in this case, constructor overloading. So in interviewer will ask you like, does constructor overloading happens, and if yes, then how? Is there any problem also? So likewise, there can be many questions regarding constructor overloading. So I hope you can understand this, that constructor is also a special method of the same name as of the class name, and if you are defining the more than one constructor with the different arguments, okay, then that is a case of constructor overloading. ठीक है, तो यहाँ पे भी मैं क्या किया कि न्यू स्टूडेंट 10 मैंने एक ऑब्जेक्ट किया विद द 10. नाउ लेट्स सी द आईडी. ओके लेट मी रन दिस. Student ID 10. Get it? Now let me create the object of let me keep it because student object equal to new student. Now I am passing ABCD. Okay, now I am printing this out. Student name equal to student. See, if I will try to get the student name with the student object, then I should not get that one. Let me try that. Student name get student name. It will be null because for this object I have not set the value of get student name. Okay, see, this is null. Okay, clear? So but I have said called the constructor of the student name. Since I am trying to get the value using the object, so that value is not associated with this object. Okay, it's associated with the student object, this one. Now let me run this. ABCD. Okay, constructor overloading can happen. Okay, if you define the multiple constructor with the different number of arguments, and how we are setting the value. Let's say if I am creating the object, let's remove this one. No need to create more than one object. Let's give this 10 comma ABCD. Okay, so here I am giving two arguments. So which constructor will satisfy? This int and student name. Okay, so we have the student. Now we can directly access with the student, get student name. Now there will be no null, we can get the value. Okay, 10 ABCD. Fine. So likewise you can create object and you can define the constructor accordingly. Okay, so next slide was about the constructor overloading. I already covered in the example that you can create constructor overloading by giving the same name, like obviously, and the different number of arguments. Okay, exception handling in constructor. Okay, so in interviewer asked these questions. Okay, and I think many developers will have confusion that can we handle exceptions in constructor, because generally we do not handle exception in constructor. Since you are not using, so you will not be sure on that, but for your knowledge, exception handling can be done in the constructor. How? So there are two cases. Okay, try catch block in constructor if class is not extending any class. Okay, since let's say if you are not using inheritance, then you can handle the using the try catch block, not an issue. But if you are using the inheritance, means you are extending any other class, then in that case you cannot use try catch block. Let me explain like why you cannot use. Okay, see, okay, first let's understand that how we can handle the exception using if there is a simple class, no inheritance. Okay, simple, you can write try catch. I will cover the exception handling in detail in another video, but for now, like, we are learning the constructor. So in constructor, interviewer ask like this, these questions, that can we handle exceptions in constructor? So yes, we can do that. Okay, not an issue. you can handle the exceptions over here. Okay, and there are other way also. If you are not handling, you can throw it through the constructor, not constructor, exceptions, throws, let me hold exception only. Okay, so if there will be any exception in this constructor, then it will throw the exception that there is an exception in this constructor. Okay, so this is the case like if you are not using inheritance. Okay, now let's see throw exception from constructor. Okay, if parent class parent class means now there is inheritance comes in the picture. So let me create extends employee class, extends employee. So now this student class is a child class. Okay, if you have learned my last video over inheritance, then you can understand that what does it mean, like student, child class, employee, parent class. Okay, so so now I am supposing that you have the clear picture of inheritance. Okay, so this is student is a child class and extending employee class. Okay, so this is the employee class. Okay, what happens since I am extending, okay, and here I have defined all type of constructor. Okay, here I have already throw the exception. Let me remove this one. So in this case, okay, in this case what happens, for every constructor, the first line, see I have written the first line as this dot student ID equal to 1. Okay, but here what will happen, it will call super. Okay, that means it will call the parent class constructor using the super keyword. With this super keyword method you can call the parent class constructor. Okay, just remember this and understand this. With super keyword you can call the parent class constructor. That's fine. If I am not defining this, then there will be a default place. Okay, means JVM will place this super keyword by default. If I am not giving this, then the first line of the constructor is to call the base class super class or parent class constructor. Okay, so here it is placed by default. Okay, so this will call the default constructor of this one. Okay, since there is no argument passed. Okay, here you can see that student class is a child class. Okay. In this student class, in this No-Arg constructor, I have written this super keyword, but in this student single parameter constructor I have not written anything. That does not mean JVM will not place this super keyword by default over here. So always remember, in case of inheritance in child class constructor, always there is a super keyword, super this line. Okay, it's hidden over here. The first line is this one always for all the constructors, since I am extending this one. Okay, but if I define explicitly the any argument passing in this in this super, then it will call that respective constructor. But if I am not defining this, then it will, this line will call the No-Arg constructor. If not giving this, then also it will call the No-Arg constructor. But since if I am defining and passing any value, like here you can see that imp emp id and emp name, two parameter constructor is there. So 1 comma abc. So this will call this constructor. Okay, so if I create let me write down sys out parameter constructor called. Now it will be clear to you. Okay, see, if I am creating the here I am creating the object with one parameter, right, and I have not defined anything over here, and calling the and running the program, you can see that it will call the No-Arg constructor. Okay, because JVM has placed the super keyword by default in this constructor. But let's say I am not defining any, not giving any parameter. That means it will call the default constructor, and in this line I have written this super, okay, with the two parameter. So now no-arg, since I am in the no-arg constructor of the student, but it will call the two parameter constructor of the employee class. Let's run the program. Parameter constructor called student ID is 1. Okay, so I think you can understand now, okay, that how you know we can call the super class constructor or parent class constructor. Okay, using the super keyword you can call the constructor. If you are not calling in case of inheritance, then by default Java will put this line super. Okay, it's a default for this constructor. If you are giving anything like this, then it will call the respective constructor with your parameter. Okay, so this was of the calling the super class constructor, parent class constructor. Now the point is that handling exception. So I had already covered the if you are not extending, but now in case of inheritance, how we can handle the exception using the we will throw the exception. See, there are two scenarios. If you are throwing the exception from the parent class, throws let's say null pointer exception, so I will handle this exception handling in detail in another session, but for now just you to understand, like if you can remember this, then it's good for you. See, I am throwing the null pointer exception in the super class, parent class, right? So this null pointer exception is runtime exception, okay, not compile time, or this is also called unchecked exception. Okay, unchecked means it will not be checked while compiling the program, it will be checked while running the program. Okay, that's why it's called unchecked. So in case of unchecked exception, okay, or runtime exception, if I am throwing any exception from the constructor or not throwing, doesn't matter. Okay, here I have not thrown any exception. Okay, see, you can see that null pointer exception of the default constructor of the employee class, and for the student class there is no exception thrown. Okay, now let me run this program. There will be no issue, no compilation error and no runtime error. Okay, parameter constructor called student ID 1. But okay, one more thing, I can throw the either null pointer exception or exception, doesn't matter. So in case of unchecked exception, it doesn't matter. Okay, I will have to give try catch block, because here I am using I am throwing the exception from the constructor of the student, right? So I will have to give this in the surround with try catch block, or will have to use the throws declaration. So I am using this one to simple use. Okay, so now there will be no issue. If I run this program, it will run fine. Okay, parameter constructor called, because the no-arg constructor is calling the super class with parameter, super constructor with the parameter Now, so this was about the if I am throwing exception unchecked or runtime exception. But what about checked exception? Checked exception means exception at compile time, like IO exception, SQL exception. Okay, so let me throw the file not found exception. Okay, so if parent class is throwing file not found exception in the constructor, in this no-arg constructor only. Okay, not about the other constructor. If I am doing anything in one constructor, then that applies to that constructor only. Okay, so in no-arg constructor I am throwing file not found exception. Okay, so now what will happen? Since this is case of inheritance, okay, you can see the error is coming through all the line. Why? Because this is calling the no-arg constructor, right? Since in the no-arg constructor there is exception thrown, and in the two parameter constructor there is no exception thrown. Okay, the checked one, compiled one. Okay, Note about the unchecked. Forget about the unchecked. There is no issue in any case of the unchecked exception. But for the checked, there is scenario. In the default, in the No-Arg constructor, I am throwing. In the 2 parameter constructor, I am not throwing. Okay. And in this example, you can see that in my default in No-Arg constructor, I am calling this 2 parameter constructor. Okay. That means it's not going in this constructor. Okay. This constructor will not get called from the No-Arg constructor because I have explicitly defined this. After the first line, you cannot write this one. Okay. This will be an error. Okay, only one time you can give the super, and that will the first line only. And in the first line, I am calling this 2 parameter constructor. So that's why there is no error coming in this No-Arg constructor. But in the one single argument constructor or the 2 argument constructor, I have called explicitly super and implicitly the same super, No-Arg constructor, right? That's why it's throwing exception. Now I have to must throw the exception, otherwise it will give the error. Okay, so here you can see that add throws declaration. So either I can give exception, you can see that. So that means if I am throwing the file not found exception, then I can give that file not found exception or any the super one. I can give the exception, their error is removed. So exception class is a super class, okay, of any exception. So I give this. Okay, file not found exception also I can give because I am throwing the file not found exception. So I can handle the file not found exception in this constructor also. So either I can give the same exception throws, or I can give the super class throws IO exception. So IO exception is also super class of the file not found exception. If you see the hierarchy of the file not found exception, then you can understand that what is the hierarchy means what are the applicable super class. So let me give throws exception. So now error is gone. Okay, so if I am throwing checked exception from the constructor of the parent class, then respective constructor who is calling that constructor, okay, the respective constructor who is calling the parent class constructor will have to handle that exception. Clear? So obviously here I have to throw the file not found exception in this IO, in this exception I am throwing. So here I have written also as a theory. You can pause the video and you can read this. If parent class constructor does not throw any exception, then child class constructor can throw any exception or cannot throw, not an issue. If parent class constructor throws exception like checked and unchecked, checked means compile time, unchecked means runtime. So compile time means while compiling the program. So checked exception, then in child class constructor you can throw same exception from the child class constructor, or you can throw the same super class exception like I did for the file not found to IO exception or to exception. Okay, and for unchecked exception there is no barrier, you can throw or not throw, can give any exception. Okay, so this was about the exception handling. Now constructor chaining. Okay, there are many tricky questions asked in the interview over the constructor chaining. So what is constructor chaining? Chaining, from the chaining word you can understand that chaining means calling one, there will be a chain will be established, chaining will be established like calling one constructor to another constructor. Okay, in simple word. So chaining is a process of calling one constructor to another constructor. Okay, so how we can achieve chaining? So there is no other meaning of the constructor chaining. Okay, it is just simple line, one constructor to another constructor. So chaining is done by two way, within the same class or base class. There are two conditions. Okay, see, within the same class means, let's say if you are not extending any parent class, then it is of the same class, and if you are doing inheritance, then the other things come in picture, like using the super that I explained you right now, right? Using the super keyword you can call the parent class constructor. So that is also a part of chaining. That is, chaining is done. We already covered one scenario. chaining is done from the this student to employee. One chain is established, right? But what happen, like if I am not extending, so let me take another example. Okay, so in this employee class I have created two field, empid, and I am throwing exceptions. Forget about this. Let me make it clean. So here I have created two constructor, okay, with No-Arg constructor and two parameter constructor. Let me create one argument constructor also. Int id, remove this one. empid parameter constructor called emp name, string emp name parameter constructor called emp name equal to emp name. Okay, now this is the two parameter constructor. Let me create public main method. Okay, public static void main. I have already created one video about this public static void main. Okay, you can learn from there what is the meaning of this. Okay, public static void main is there. Can we do any other thing over in this method or not? See, JVM knows this method only, this signature. Okay, you cannot change this one. From here the program running starts of any Java program. Okay, so public static void main string args. Now I am going to create object of employee class, employee emp equal to new employee. Okay, so let's run this program first. See, you can see that No-Arg constructor gets called. Okay, but now let me give some parameter. What will be the output? Just think. emp id parameter constructor called. Okay, so right now chaining is not happening, means the constructor is not calling one constructor to another constructor, but we can make it happen. How? We can do this using this keyword. This, see, I cannot only call this one because I am in the same No-Arg constructor, but if I give 10, see what will happen now. Now I am running this program with No-Arg constructor calling. See, emp id parameter constructor gets called, then No-Arg constructor gets called. Okay, so always the first line will be this one. Okay, you cannot call the other constructor in another line. So likewise, super, this will be also the first line. Okay, you cannot call the same constructor from the within the constructor. This will call the No-Arg constructor. So I am in the No-Arg constructor, so I cannot call this one. So I have to give this parameter. Okay, now I am calling this one and passing this. So now what will happen? This will call this parameter constructor. Okay, now let me call this 1,10. You cannot call not 1,10, 1, ABCD. You cannot call two times this one, like super also you cannot call two times, and this also you cannot call two times. Okay, so from the two time argument constructor I am calling this 10. Okay, now let's run the I am creating the object of just 10. This will called first, right? Because the type is of int type, that's why it will called first. Now let me run this program. So let me explain you first. See, when I am calling this constructor, so it will call this first, okay. So it will go here, okay. So this, okay. So it will go here. It will call this, No-Arg constructor. In this No-Arg constructor, what will be the output? It will not print the first this line, okay, because now control is gone to the 11 from 11 to 27. Line number 11 is calling this constructor. So now it comes to 27. But again, this will not print all the parameter. Let me put right here 2 parameter, okay. So this 10 will called again. So this is a dead end, okay. Not dead end. This 10 will called emp name, because this is a string, not int type, okay. So emp name. So first line print will be emp name parameter constructor gets called. First print line will be this printed. Then after that again control will back to this line number 29. 2 parameter constructor is get called. After that 2 it will call No-Arg constructor. Then at last it will call emp id parameter constructor. Here you can see that first it is calling emp name parameter. So I am calling the single argument constructor with the int one, right? So it will call this to, it will come to this one. From this to 2 parameter constructor, from 2 to this emp name. That's why I told you the first line will be emp name parameter constructor calling. After that calling, control after completing this execution, okay. So this all line will execute. So if I will try to get the employee name in the employee one, before this system.out.println, then I will get the 10 as employee name, okay. So if I will print the employee name here, then it will print the employee name as 10, because I have already set over here. You can let me type right also. Emp name set from emp name constructor, okay, equal to plus object is the emp emp name, okay. So what will the output? First line print will be emp name parameter constructor calling, okay. Then it will set the emp name, right, and it will, and the control will back to this 28 number line, and then it will print emp name, then 2 parameter constructor calling, okay. 2 parameter constructor calling, then control the value will be set over here, and then it will go back where, from where this 10 was this 2 parameter constructor was called, from the No-Arg constructor. Then No-Arg constructor will come, and from the No-Arg it was called from here to emp id parameter constructor called will be the last line. So just follow the trail like from where it's going, okay. So emp name parameter constructor called, emp name set from emp name constructor abcd, right. Then 2 parameter constructor, the calling return to the same point from where this was called. So 2 parameter constructor, then it was called from the No-Arg constructor, then it was then it will run the emp id parameter constructor, okay, and then it will set the emp id at last, okay. So this way the chaining happens in the same constructor, and if there is a about the inheritance, then using the super keyword, okay. Okay, so this and super both cannot be called together, okay. So in super class chaining, constructor chaining, okay, you cannot call this now, okay. I cannot call this with 10. So don't assume that you can do chaining within the class and outside the class at the same time. You cannot do this, because this and super is written on the first line only, okay. No order for constructor chaining, obviously no order, because how you are defining the constructor does not matter. How you are creating the object, that matters, right? Here I am creating the object with the single parameter constructor. So single parameter constructor will get called first, and from there how the chaining is happening, that matters. Okay? So order does not matter, how you have written the constructors. Init block. There is one more concept from here, many tricky questions also asked. See, the purpose of constructor is to initialize the object. Purpose of init block is to initialize the objects. Okay, so generally it is asked also, why multiple constructors required? Okay, why we cannot do in the same constructor? Yes, we can do. Code length will be increased, readability will decrease. Okay, so to better reading, to better management, we are defining multiple constructor according to our use. Init block, the execution matters. Okay, like let's say here I have defined 1 2 3 4 constructors. Okay, and let's say in all these constructors I have to print sys out learning constructor. Okay, I want that. Okay, obviously after this before this we can before this we cannot write. I am writing over here. Okay, so if I want that this learning constructor to print in every constructor call, then what will happen? You will copy this line and paste in all these constructors, right? You will do copy and paste in all the line, right? Just paste, right? Now run the program. See, learning constructor, learning constructor, learning constructor, learning constructor, 4 times it is printed. But if I say that print the learning constructor in the first, as the first line only, okay, in the beginning, okay, then how you will do this? You can do this using init block. If you want to the common things do first before the running of the constructor, then you can do that in the init block. Okay, so let's remove this line and let me write in the init block. Init block is defined with this curly braces only. Okay, now what will happen? Before running the constructor, it will print the learning constructor. Since chaining is happening, then it will print multiple times. It's not like that. So init block runs just once. So here I have printed learning constructor in the beginning. Okay, that means execution of init block is done before the execution of constructor. Okay, so does order matters in init block? If there is just one init block, then no point of order. But if there are more than one init block, then obviously order matters. See, first it will print learning constructor, then two learning constructor, okay, then other things. So now if I cut this and paste first, then first it will print two learning, then learning constructor. Two learning constructor, learning constructor. So order matters in init block, not in the constructor. Okay. More than one init block defined, then it runs in the order that it is defined. Okay. Init block runs before the constructor. So I have covered almost all the things that is asked in interview questions, and many developers will not be able to answer, confidently. But if you have reached till this, slide, then you will be able to understand and you will be able to answer all those questions. Okay. What is the return type of constructor? No, there is no return type. Exception handling in constructor, yes, you can handle. How? Try catch. Yes, you can do that, but in the same class only. In case of inheritance, you cannot do that. Exception throw in constructor, yes, we can throw that. Constructor overloading, yes, it happens. How? Same name, same constructor, different arguments. Programming questions on constructor chaining and init block. The same programming questions is asked, okay? The order, the execution order, like how it runs, what will be the output of this program. Such kind of questions can come. Does order matter in constructor chaining? No. Does order matter in init block? Yes. Which runs first, constructor or init block? Init block. Okay. So I hope I am able to make you understand that what is constructor, what is chaining, what is init block, can we handle exception, can we throw exception. Okay. So all the things you can answer, after learning this. So if you have any doubt, still if you have any doubt over the constructor and all the concepts that I have explained today, if you have any doubt, then please comment in comment box. I will try to answer your questions. Thank you.